Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this episode of Speak Your Truth, the podcast where we do just that. We speak your truth and we talk about what matters truly the most to you in the world of 911 dispatch and in the PSAP of today and tomorrow. I'm your host, Samantha Hawkins, aka the Gypsy Dispatcher and creator of the Gold Line Truths blog series for Exacom's Online Learning Center. And today we got a good one. And I apologize because I know I'm going to say this every episode because I get real animated and I get excited. Oh, we got a good one today. But we got a good one. We really, really do. Got one of my good friends in the industry, and she's going to do herself justice and give her introduction. But let me just speak and say what she's not going to say. She is truly one of the giants in this industry, a true leader. 25 years in 911, I believe 30 years totally in the public safety space, and retired, but still working in our space as a contractor, supporting the headset heroes and championing for us. We're going to get into our episode for today where we're going to be talking about what does the future of 911 look like, engineering a better 911 space. But before we do that, quick word about our sponsor, Exacom, who helps finance series like this, as well as the Gold Line Truth blog, and really backs up their belief with their money in supporting our headset heroes. And talking about engineering a better 911, it's true. Advancements in technology have overwhelmed dispatchers with information. When seconds count, dispatchers need a solution to help them cut through the noise to get the information that matters quickly. And Prism is a solution for doing that. Prism provides AI-powered tools for powerful translation and transcription through a single deployment option. That's right, a single deployment option, and delivers critical information to make swift, smart, and life-saving decisions. Visit Prism, P-R-I-Z-Y-M, P-R-I-Z-Y-M, M as in Mike, .co, or you can find the link in the episode description and get some more information about the solution of Prism and what it provides. And tying into that, again, the topic of a better 911, a better 911. Keely, it's good to have you on, my friend.
Thank you for having me, Sam. I'm excited.
Girl, you should be excited, but I'm even more excited. Again, I will hype you up and talk about you. You are truly a great leader in this industry. But Keely, before we delve into our topic and talking about really what do we see for the future of 911, for the future generations of telecommunicators to come, please introduce yourself to the listeners of the Speak Your Truth podcast.
I don't know how I follow myself out with a hype girl like you. I really don't. I have no idea how I'm supposed to do that. But so I'm Keely Heyman. I am recently retired. My last day was December 1st of 2024. So I am fresh out of the 911 center. I still smell like a headset, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, so I decided to go ahead and try and open my own business. And almost immediately after stepping out of the space, I was picked up by a business in the industry, and I enjoy it. I do. I like that I can still touch 911 from a safe distance with a company that I really do believe in. So that's, it's been great to try it out from the private side. I came to the dark side.
Oh, girl, I relate to that so much, and truly, obviously on the dark side as well, and love and appreciate. We've got some great companies out there providing great solutions, and we're talking about some of those solutions now. My blog for this month for Exacom's Online Learning Center, Gold Line Truth blog, it's talking about engineering a better 911, and I actually drew a parallel between, as a football lover, what would my ultimate NFL player look like? And we have these conversations as football lovers. I've had this conversation before. Like, my dream player would have the arm of this person, of this quarterback, would have the legs and the speed of this running back, and the drive of this player, right? Great ideas. We're talking about it for 911. We're talking about it for this space. Keely, we had $1 billion to make a billion big ideas come true for our industry. where would you start? In my blog, I talked about some of the things that I had in my mind, and but I want to hear from you. What is your speak your truth? What would it look like for you, the future PSAP?
I mean, $1 billion, right? $1 billion means that we finally got our funding, and they have finally, at the federal level, have decided that we matter, and that,
Wow.
our consoles are just as important as the big flashy light vehicles that are out in the field, like the cop cars and the fire trucks, right? $1 billion
Yes.
means that we're able to build out training programs and pay better for our people in the industry, and they've recognized us that at the federal level that we're actually part of the chain of first response, right? Like $1 billion
True.
means that yeah, right. $1 billion means that we'd be able to actually do the things that would support our staff, support
Wow.
our industry, support our people who are trying to make it better for them. It would mean that the federal government has decided that, hey, maybe we deserve retirement programs and access
Oh,
to our
wow.
benefits programs, and all of the things that would build a better 911 for the future, right? The things that we wish that we had when we were in the space, the things that made sense. Because let's face it, there's not a million of us out there that are making it to 25 years in the industry. And there's reasons for that. There's reasons why some of us let go early. There's reasons why some of
Mm.
us step away early on in our careers. And it's because there's better packages out there, better things for them to do. But I think it would mean that we're no longer a stepping stone for the rest of the industry, right?
Wow, and that is so true. And I've got to back up because you hit on something. You mentioned about the retirement packages, and I know we were talking about this prior. How important it is when we think about the future, the ultimate PSAP and everything. You mentioned we was talking about this about building on the experience in 911. How crucial is that to the future of the PSAP?
So, there's something to be said about the fact that a lot of our industry is used as the stepping stone, right? Like they're going to spend 2 to 3, and as an administrator, I was up against this all the time. I knew I
Hmm.
was going to have a dispatcher for 2 to 3 years, if I was lucky, 4 to 5, and I could build and work with those people in the time that I had them. But like,
Yes.
there's something to be said about our industry and what the level of experience can do in our industry, right? Like there
Mm.
are I made this reference with you earlier about Shrek, right? Like we're like onions. There's layers and layers of 911 that needs to be built upon. And a lot of that is experience, right? Like I might know, like if I'm there for years, I might know my jurisdiction like the back of my hand. I might understand that a particular caller that we deal with all the time needs something certain in a certain way. And it helps with that transmission, right? Like it helps with us
Yes.
being able make those calls and process those calls and do them faster and more efficiently because we have the experience. We understand the different levels of technology that are being thrown at us all the time, right? But we have experience in the space. What if technology fails? How many
Mm.
people out there would know what to do in that moment? I mean, I would, because I started as a baby dispatcher when we didn't have all this cool, scary technology that's out there right now, right? But like
Yes.
that comes
Yes.
with experience, right? Because
Mm.
you know, system outages, these things are going to happen. It's not a perfect system. Nothing that we do with technology is a perfect system. Nothing. So like 911 is, that can have its problems and its faults and its hurdles as well. But imagine if we had the experience to be able to build on what to do in those situations and how that works. I mean, when I left my first alma mater dispatcher, it was 17 years that I took with me on the way out the door. That's a
Wow.
lot. Right. That
Yes.
that's a lot that you're taking, and then you're losing these people after 2 or 3 years because they're going to go on to be a firefighter, they're going to be a police officer. And I totally get it. For years, that's how we dealt with this in the industry, right? Like you want to be a police officer,
Yes.
go dispatch for a couple of years. But that's not where we are anymore. There is so
Mm.
much more that we are doing in the space of 911. We're not answering phones. We're not just dispatchers anymore. And
There you
I
go.
think that's, you mentioned
Mm.
this earlier. We're no longer referring to ourselves as call centers, right? Because we're not operators who are taking phone calls. And
There we
that
go. Yes.
matters. Yeah, that matters in the industry, right? Like these are things, the experience levels that you can't replicate in our silo of 911. I'd like to call it that, because it's a lot different than being a police officer. It's a lot different than being a firefighter. It's a lot different than being a paramedic. These are different pieces of first response, and so is 911. And I just think there's something to be said about being able to maintain that expertise and become subject matter experts on 911 as a whole, as an industry, right?
Wow. Yes. Yes. And so we've got to talk about that, because well, you hit on that about that just the dispatcher. When we think about engineering a better 911, there's the technology, and we understand there are some wild, amazing, great changes that are happening in that. But engineering a better 911, it's also about mindset. It's about the attitudes that we're building, right? The attitude of belonging from day one, about getting people to invest, which I know we're going to talk about more, because you was talking about that earlier, about getting our people to actually, like, this is why you go to conferences and everything. But let's talk about the language, right? When we were talking earlier, I know you said to me, we were kind of talking about how 25 years ago, you look back and you think about how the language of just a 911 dispatcher, and we had this conversation before we even started this recording about, we're all guilty. I'm guilty of it too, using that. You just kind of throw it out there in a call. You're like, oh, I'm just a dispatcher, man. Just a dispatcher.
Yeah.
Thinking about that, how now 25 years later, you, seasoned leader in this industry, giant in this industry, retired, and you look back on that and you think about that language that was used, language that now, we're moving away from. We're realizing how important it was, right? Because the language of what we call ourselves, what we call our centers, matters when now we're fighting this fight on the federal level of, we are not just dispatchers. It's not call centers, and understanding that. It really gets me thinking, because why is language so important to that? Why is that also important to the future of 911 and the ultimate PSAP that we want to build?
So I know I said this, and it's a quote that has stuck with me, and it's, we are the stories that we tell ourselves, right? So when you are talking about yourself and you are saying, I'm just something, I'm just a dispatcher, you're taking away what power you have.
We got to back up, because that quote, I'm not even playing. I need to get some notes or something. I need to get a notebook or something. And I need to
write it down.
Again, woman, because that was deep.
We are the stories we tell ourselves. So if you continue to use language that downgrades you as a employee, you as a professional, you're going to believe that your voice in what you're doing doesn't matter, right? So if I'm saying if I said I'm just a director, how much confidence would you have in me as your leadership if I'm walking around saying I'm just the director? It's okay that we joke about it. Like, how many times you're like, that's above my pay grade, right? Like, we've got dark humor in this industry, and you're allowed to have it. But like, when you say something like that, you're taking ownership on being less than. And you're not less than anything. You're bigger than the world behind that console that you're sitting at. Like, your world of 911 expands in a million different directions. And I am proof point that happens, right? When you step out of the industry, there are so many other things that are going on this side of the world to try to make and build structures to support a 911 center, right? But like, imagine if we gave our people the tools to understand that early on in their careers. I look back at myself when I was a baby dispatcher, because we started when I was 12, right? Like, because it's the only way this makes sense, because I can't possibly be as old as I am. But like, when I started, I didn't even know there were national standards, right? Like, I didn't understand that we had, there was NINA and APCO. There were places that were actually writing standards and procedures for us. I had no idea that existed, because I was just a dispatcher. I sat under a law enforcement umbrella, and many places out in the space do. I understand that we are trying to get away from that. I'm not going to take that away. We are, but it's still there. But the problem is that if you don't understand that how the systems operate, and how the radio system works and how the 911 system works and how the phone's connectivity comes into your center, you're not expanding on the fact that you are the subject matter expert in your
Mm.
field, right? Like we would never take away from a police officer who's been doing it for 25 years that he understands security, emergency management, law enforcement, right? Like we don't take that away. So why, when you're working for as many years as you had as a 911 dispatcher, are we not having the same conversation? Why are we
Wow.
not sending those people to conferences? Why are we not sending them to go get certifications in the space, industry standard certifications, your CMPs, your CPEs, your RPLs, your all of those? Like there's a lot, and there are
Yes. And
scholarships.
scholarships for them.
There's scholarships for them, right? But like,
Yes.
did you know? Like, be honest, Sam. Did you know that they existed in space until you started working your way through?
No, I did not. I was 5 years in. 5 years in before I even realized, like, what is APCO? What is NINA? I mean, you just some of these things that were, you just heard, you used, you had a couple classes, but not understanding there are conferences for us
Right,
dedicated to
for
us.
just us, right?
Yes,
Just us,
by
just
us.
by us. Like these
By
these
us.
are these are things that are put together for us. But the thing is that I was 10 years in,
Wow.
10 years in before I was allowed to go to a conference. And so when I look back at that, and I look back at my career, and a couple of years ago, I was just talking to somebody recently about receiving an award in the industry. And in the
Mm,
beginning, I downplayed it because that goes back to how we talk about ourselves, right? And we
go
downplay
ahead.
what we do because we've been taught to do that. We've been taught to stick ourselves in a box and to close the door and to hide from the rest of
Ooh.
what we do in emergency services, right? So like we're in a
Mm,
box. We have no windows, we close the doors, we sit in the dark, we grow mushrooms, and we don't allow ourselves to shine in those dark spaces.
mm.
And so even as I got that award, I was like, I'm going to put that somewhere back on a shelf and it'll collect dust. But somebody asked me about it and what it meant to me. And now that I'm able to step out and go back and reflect, it meant that I became the leader I wanted when I was 19 years old when I started in this career. And I think
Wow.
there's something to be said about the leadership today. And it is starting to change and it is starting to get better. Again, we have a lot of toxic environments. We are born and bred in hostile work environments. We have staffing crises. We all know what our barriers
Yes.
are. But then I have to ask the question of if I didn't step away and step back and take a self assessment, I wouldn't have become the leader that I wanted to be for myself when I was 19 years old, when I was stepping into this industry. So, like, the question I have to the administrators that are out there in the space is, what did you need when you started? And like, I
Mm.
needed somebody to tell me that there was a career path in what I was doing and that I didn't need to constantly think of, well, when I resign or, well, when I get my real job. It is a real job. For the love of God, it is a real job. It's an important job. Please know that what you're doing matters and that you are the subject matter expert and that you are the professional. And I think engineering a new 911 center means understanding that this is a career path, that this is a professional job. And for the longest time, we have had these and still to this day, I visit centers and I know that people are like, oh, the administration sucks and my job sucks. And it's like, well, if it feels that way, you should probably move on. But also, what are you doing to fix it? Or are you just
Whoa.
part of the problem? Are you just festering in the toxicity? And I was, listen, guilty as charged, right? Like I was too at one point where I was just in the muck of it. But like the only
Hmm.
path forward is becoming the things that you wanted out of your future.
So wait
And
a minute. Wait a minute, Keely, because you just spoke a core point to this conversation. When we talk about the future PSAP, the ultimate PSAP of the future, what you're saying, what I'm hearing from you, is that right now we need our listeners, our people who are watching this podcast to realize they are the future. You mean
You
they
are the future.
right
Yes,
now represent the
right now,
future? Oh,
represent
oh,
the future.
oh, wow.
They're the ones that are gonna dictate what happens next, right? Like they're the ones that are going to understand that like we don't need to be a toxic environment. We don't need to be a hostile environment. We don't need to have, the like
Wow.
we are the ones who are going to have the conversations with our congressmen. And we're going to tell
Mm,
them that we are professionals in the space and that our careers matter. I don't understand why we don't look at air traffic control, right? Like when we look at air traffic control, they understand that their jobs are stressful. They understand
mm.
that they've got, you know, big important jobs. The feds recognize this to the point where they push them out of those spaces early on in their careers. I think it's at 12 years. Don't quote me for the air traffic controllers in the space. I could be speaking out of turn. But I think it's at like 12 years where they start to have to move on to supervision, to administrative roles, because they
Wow.
take them away from the consoles because what they're doing is stressful. And here we are, we've got stressful jobs in the space, but yet many of us can't retire. Like I took a penalty walking out at 25 years, right? But many of us can't move on until 60. And some of us aren't guaranteed, your benefits. They're not guaranteed. Like there's a whole, like, we have a whole division that already understands how important the role of being part of, flight
Wow. Mm,
behind the
mm.
console doing those things. Like we are part of emergency services, right? We are part of that team. And without us, nobody else goes, right? No,
Yes.
nobody's going anywhere unless I answer the phone. So let's make sure that the people answering that side of the phone are professional people who are educated people in the space who have gone and gotten industry certifications that show that they care about what they're doing and that what the work they do matters. You know, I Dr. Steve in the space, Dr. Steve teaches CPE, and there was a quote that I wrote down, and I have it tattooed on my arm now because of him. And the quote says, "If not you, then who?"
Mm.
And that is the
Wow.
future of 911. If not you, then who is the future of 911? Who engineers that space for the future? If it's not you, then who?
Wow. And you know what? Oh my goodness. So much to take away. But here's the other key point that you just hit on. Take away the thought of $1 billion. Take away all that. And if we just think starting here, starting today, starting now, starting with what we have, what I heard from you, it was an example that the answers are already out there. We're not talking about reinventing a brand new wheel, discovering the fire of 2025. We are talking about answers that already exist, solutions, some of them that are already out there, and saying, hey, how can we take this and apply it to our industry? So that too is a part of engineering, is realizing that yes, we know this is our club and exclusive, but not excluding other industries that might have some solutions. Like you mentioned, I never thought about that. Like with air traffic controllers, how we could look at that and say, hey, maybe that is a model that some of those things we can adapt in our profession. That is profound.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's out there, right? And there are some centers out there who have put some hard work in, right? And who have tried
Yes.
to change the conversation and are doing those things. They've become the leadership they wanted, and they're trying to drive industry standards to a different location, right? And that's really, yeah, there's all this technology coming, and yeah, there's it's going to be different. It's going to be way different than when I started. And I'm a little upset that I stepped out and I don't get to play with all those tools that are
I
coming.
know.
I'm a little jealous. But there's so much to be said for the future of this space as it pertains to technology, as it pertains to professionalism, as it pertains to professional certifications and education. There's just so much that could be adapted and changed. Like you take a look at and air traffic control, I'm going to say it again, they go away for 6 months to train.
Hmm.
Could you imagine if we made a national standard where like the gypsy dispatchers of the world didn't have to adapt to every individual ECC that they walk into, that it's the same standard? Like the Coast Guard on the East Coast can be the Coast Guard on the West Coast because they train exactly the same. Could you imagine that future for 911? Could you imagine that? I would love to see it. Right? I would love to see this. I would love to be a part of that and a part of that training in that future.
Keely, let's wrap this up, woman. So as we understand, the future of the PSAP, the future of 911 is incredible because the people that fill the seat are incredible. And we've got great technology out there. What used to be like the future, now the present and the here and now. And we've got great companies such as Exacom providing those solutions for, transcripts and things that, again, was like a dream. Now we've got stuff like that happening. But moving away, I want your final words that our vendors, our companies on the technology forefront, they are doing the thing to engineer a better 911. What are your final words for us? Well, those who fill the seat. We're on the dark side now, these things. But for those who are our headset heroes, who are filling the seat on the front lines, what are your final words for them about the hope for 911?
Again, I'm going to go back to, if not you, then who? If you aren't the future of 911, then who's going to fill those spaces and who's going to change the dialogue about how we talk about ourselves? Stop using the word just. You're not just anything. You are the current, you are the professionals. And if you're not doing it out there, then who's gonna?
That's it. That's it. Thank you so much, Keely. Always a pleasure. Love you, girl. Thank you for your time, your effort, and thank you for what you continue to do in the 911 space and for public safety as a whole. And thank you for Exacom again for facilitating and sponsoring content like this that is all about the truth and what matters most to our headset heroes. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time for next episode of Speak Your Truth podcast. Bye, y'all.